over the next few weeks, we kept getting things from the shoot. As things went into post-production, we'd get little offcuts. We started to make things. We made a little thing for the PSP. We made more wallpapers, just filled it with little cocktails and canapes in what looked like a publishing schedule. In fact, it was just get it up as we got them. This thing went nuts. In the space of the 5 months that we measured it properly, sort of 3 fairly big things happened, which really woke me up to the what happens when consumers get on board and start to move something around of their own volition. First of all, we went from a tiny little audience in San Francisco, and we looked at their browser profile to kind of give ourselves some idea of who was looking at this. And this is one of the things that comes up again and again in social media, is we don't have a Barb rating or a Nielsen rating or a standardized measurement and tracking system. So we have to kind of reverse engineer our own from what sorts of metrics we can get out of it. And it's starting to change. You have a Flickr professional account, you can start to see the number of views that come to a set of images. YouTube has some reporting metrics, but they're generally designed for overly enthusiastic consumers. They're not designed for professional reporting for a client who needs to send it to the global marketing director who needs to put it in front of the board. So you've kind of got to jerry-rig things a bit at the moment. It's changing. Lots of these platforms are opening up their APIs, so you can start to pull things into single environments and start to compare and contrast, but it's early days. So we had this kind of reasonably quite rich in its detail, but rudimentary in sort of how it's structured information coming from our blog. And one of the things we could see was the browser profiles. So we thought, okay, as this kicks off, we've got primarily Safari and Firefox. And Safari being Mac users, and this being 2005, Firefox is deeply geeky. Is really the sharp end of the sort of technology user. And then over the 5 months, as the audience grew, we saw this, with a tiny sliver of Internet Explorer, we saw the IE component grow and grow until by the end of it, it pretty much matched the BBC's browser profiles. So the thing that sort of woke me up to, the thing that this woke me up to was we can start with a small group of people and they will take it and spread it and spread it and spread it. So it works like that, which is the opposite to what we'd done before, where you would put a banner on a website and you'd get that many impressions and that many click-throughs and kind of that many registrations at the end or whatever it was. This was sort of the opposite. We started out with a tiny group of people and it went out like that. And it's just the inverse of how one normally thinks about traditional media, or thinks about media traditionally. So that happened. The number of people and what they did was fairly extraordinary as well. So over those 5 months, we had 7 million engagements. And by an engagement, I don't mean someone just visiting the page. I mean they looked at a video, or they downloaded an image, or they linked to it, or they did something active. 7 million. Now, the whole thing cost £70,000. I can say that because we put it into an IPA report and it's public record. Normally, I wouldn't talk about clients' budgets. And the effectiveness of that blew us away. That's a penny an engagement. Now, it's important to note that that doesn't include the cost of the advert, because the advert was, of course, many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of euros. But the budget to amplify it was 70,000. Of that, most of it was hosting, because we hosted a lot of the video ourselves. So you had this kind of huge download bill as people viewed the stuff. So that was mostly what it was, just offering up the content. In terms of building the CMS, filling it with full of content, the planning, the client management, all the other bits and bobs, that was a really small component. So the second thing was, wow, this is very cost effective, taking out the cost of the advert. But if you've got something really exciting to talk about, something that is, as unique as a cannon firing coloured balls down a hill in San Francisco and can be explained or displayed or represented in a really dramatic, exciting, interesting way, then you will engage an audience and they'll pass it on. And the third thing that happened was the impact it had on the search. So we registered a URL, bravia-advert.com, and that was what the blog was under. And for the next 2 years, until another agency took it and turned it into a flash microsite, which Google can't see, up until that point, we owned the term advert. If you put advert, just the generic term advert, into Google, this came up number 1 for 2 years. And the reason is all the links that social media generates massively increase Google's view or opinion of the relevancy of this to particular search terms, in this case, advert. The downside of that is Sony don't actually make adverts, they make tellies and cameras and all the other things. So one, it told us that it has a massive impact on search. And as you pay, more and more brands are paying for search traffic, this is becoming a vital way of getting that exposure, and a very cost-effective way of getting that exposure. But secondly, you need to be careful what you wish for, because we didn't really need to own the term advert. What we needed to own was high-definition TVs. So lesson learned there. So these 3 things, the ability to move the conversation from a small group of influencers to a large audience, the cost-effectiveness of it, and the impact on search, kind of had a fairly dramatic impact on me. And from that point, I felt that there was a job to be done in measuring and planning social media, and that the execution was going to be this kind of ongoing but very light form of marketing, because the tools that we used generally were platforms that existed. The blog was built using, I think it was WordPress or some kind of templated blog platform. The images were put up on Flickr. The video was, when we didn't host it, it was put up on Google Video and eventually on YouTube. So the technical skills, in some ways, were fairly light. I mean, compared to building a really sort of robust e-commerce platform or something of that nature, they're things that I, as the strategist, could start to get my head around, and certainly working with polite and tolerant developers, they could kind of guide you through, well, now we've built the platform, to update it, you just need to log in, and it's kind of like word processing. So, right, so I can put the video up there, I can add the images, I can add the word and the content. So that is what inspired me to go out and start doing social media as a standalone discipline.